All right, we're live.
Thank you. All right, Wayne, you can start us up on the broadcast, please. Good evening. The February 23rd, 2021 regular meeting of the Roseville Area Schools ISD 623 School Board is hereby called to order. Clerk Johnson, could you please take the roll?
Treasurer Goggins.
Here.
Director Chu.
Here.
Director Anderson.
Here.
Director Shaw.
Here.
Chair Boguszewski.
Here. Thank you.
Clerk-
Do we have any agenda
Clerk Johnson
adjustments?
is here.
Oh, sorry. Do we have any agenda adjustments tonight, Superintendent Scoli?
We do not. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no public comments. I think we do have an announcement. Treasurer
Yes,
Goggins?
please. Thank you. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank everyone who provided input on the superintendent search process by completing the online survey or participating in focus groups. More than 800 shared their insight via the survey, and close to 100 participated in the focus groups. The input is extremely valuable to inform us on the important attributes to look for in a new superintendent, and more broadly to help us understand the perceptions of different constituent groups about our district. Thank you so much. I would also like to recognize the work of Michelle Tessum and Josh Collins in making this process happen so quickly and effectively. Within 8 days, Michelle was able to organize 9 focus groups, which was amazing. It involved working with key contacts to define who to invite, contacting all the potential invitees, and finding a sufficient number available to attend at the scheduled times. Josh was heavily involved in communicating the survey to parents, staff, students, community organizations, and the public broadly. The breadth of distribution was impressive and was important to obtaining the desired level of community input. So we'd like to thank so much for Josh and Michelle for making this work happen.
Thank you very much, Kitty. Very, very well said, and very well deserved thanks to 2 people who work tirelessly for our students, our families, our staff, and our whole community. Thank you very much. There is no community input. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, accepting gifts and retirements.
So moved.
Thank you, Curtis.
Second?
Second, Kitty. Any discussion? Seeing none, could you take the vote, please, Curtis?
Director Chu.
Aye.
Director Anderson.
Aye.
Director Shaw.
Aye.
Treasurer Goggins.
Aye.
Chair Boguszewski.
Aye.
And Clerk Johnson votes aye.
Great. And then, as I noted, we pulled that out. I think we do have a retirement this evening. Dr. Johnson, if you'd like to share that with us.
Yes, we have a retirement tonight. Margaret Kaufman, Building Secretary, Parkview Center School. She has worked for the district for the last 32 years. It's impressive amount of dedication to the district. We thank her for her service.
Great. So
Second?
all in favor of accepting Margaret Kaufman's retirement with gratitude? Curtis, I'll let you take the roll on the vote.
Treasurer Goggins.
Aye.
Director Anderson.
Aye.
Director Shaw.
Aye.
Director Chu.
Aye.
Chair Boguszewski.
Aye.
And Clerk Johnson votes aye.
Thank you. And as Clerk Johnson noted, 32 years, oh my gosh, a lifetime of service to our district. So thank you very much, Ms. Kaufman, for all those years, and all the best to you. We did have some gifts. I think Treasurer Goggins, you were going to share those with us this evening.
Yes, thank you. Central Park Elementary School received from Roseville Lutheran Church Cub food gift certificates for families in need in memory of Jacoby Wallace. Parkview Center School received from Wells Fargo the Black Baud Giving Fund, Your Cause, funds for principal's discretion, And Roseville Area Schools generally receive from Prince of Peace Lutheran Church funds for Meals on Wheels program. I always thank our generous community for supporting our families and our students. Thank you.
We do. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And thank you to the givers out there. We really, really appreciate it. With that, we can move to reports and non-action items. And I think first up this evening is the program participation report that we hear each year with Dr. Lake, Karen Filla, and Jake Pondelinda. So Dr. Lake, will you be kicking this one off?
I actually will start with this one. And we also have Trina Hira, who is in with us this evening as well.
Excellent.
And so don't want to leave her out as well. So, and Michelle, I believe, is going to start the slides for us so we can get started. But I appreciate you having us here this evening. And this is an annual report that we do and look at different programs within our school district. I'll be starting off, obviously, but then I'll have others join in and they can introduce themselves as well as we come in. So.
I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. Let me try
No
again.
problem. Well, I can just start, and kind of the first couple of slides are non data slides. So I'll just kind of go ahead and just so you have an awareness. There's 4 areas that we're going to be looking at tonight in terms of their participation. Each of those areas, so we have gifted and talented, the advanced options at the middle level, activities and athletics, and our special education. So those are the 4 areas that we will be reading as a part of this report. But I also want to thank the other folks that helped put the information together. Some of them are presenting tonight and others did work that are behind the scenes. So I want to thank Trina Hira, Karen Filla, Rebecca Wade, Tina Clausen, Jenny Lake, and Reed Hornung for their help in putting this report together and also helping to present it with some of them tonight. And I'm always amazed by the amount of work that goes behind the scenes to just put a few data slides together. There's just, if you've ever done data work before, there's a lot of digging before you get to the actual report and the presentation of that also. So appreciate all that work that goes in behind there. So.
Sure. And Jake, since we have a few seconds still, apparently, maybe you can even just briefly state for those who aren't familiar with this report, what it's about and what use it is to us and what we're really looking at here.
Yeah, absolutely. What we look for is we're really looking at who is participating in these different groups or programs. And we're looking at it by race, by students who qualify for some in the areas of free and reduced priced meals, EL students, and students who are in special education. And we monitor that because we have had, and we know education has had issues around historically underrepresenting students of color, and some of these programs are overrepresenting them in some of these other programs too. So it gives us a look at where our district is at and the support that we need, where we need to put our resources as well.
And Jake, I'm sorry, my screen share isn't working, so I've asked Trina if she could try it out.
And I could do that too, Michelle.
Yeah, that would be great if one of you is able to screen share.
Trina, are you able to?
I think I am. Hold on here. I just don't know how to get it into present mode.
Et voila.
There we go.
Is that big enough though? I don't use this program very often, and when I me just see.
Yeah, try it from beginning.
Oh, there it goes.
There you go.
Okay,
Perfect.
thank you. Sorry about that. All right, so
All
can
right.
I go ahead, Jake?
Yes, please do.
All right. Hi, everybody. Good to see you and good to be with you tonight. I'm Trina Hira. I am the District Coordinator of Gifted and Talented Education, and I'll be presenting to you the participation report on Gifted and Talented. Formal identification for gifted services in Roseville begins in grade 3. The participation data represents students who have been formally identified as gifted in grades 3 through 12. Kindergarten through second grade students are considered informally identified as gifted, so they are not included in this data set. Also, 1.0 is considered a proportionate amount. Anything over 1.0 indicates overrepresentation, and anything under 1.0 indicates underrepresentation. All right. Student group abbreviations are on the left side of the table, and each student group has a unique line in the graph showing the changes over the last 4 years. You'll note that white students remain overrepresented in gifted and talented identification. They're overrepresented by about 1.5 times their proportionate population. All other student groups are underrepresented to varying degrees. There have been increases in both our American Indian and multiracial student groups, but any underrepresentation, of course, is unacceptable. We've been trying to address the extreme underrepresentation of English learners, American Indian, special education, Black, Hispanic, and students who qualify for free and reduced meals. A couple of examples of how we've been, excuse me, addressing the underrepresentation. We changed to a nonverbal assessment a few years ago, but this did not have the positive impact that we had hoped. We created an identification matrix for historically underserved students, and this was based on research of identification practices, but this only made minimal impact. This year, we're piloting a process in which some of our EL teachers will have direct involvement in the identification process. And we hope next year to include all EL teachers. We also have 2 EL representatives on our GATE task force that is looking at revisioning our program. As I mentioned a few weeks ago in our study session, we are aware from our own practices of informally identifying our younger students and from practices from other districts around the state and country that are addressing these same inequities, that universal screening and local norming are key to proportional representation. So we've had universal screening in place for years, but we have not been able to implement local norming in our formal identification practices. When we can implement local norming, we feel confident that we will accurately identify students from groups that have been historically underrepresented in gifted education. And we base this on the evidence that we have in our informal practices in which we use local norming. So last, I'll just mention that, again, we've assembled a task force. We're going to be working this year to create a proposal for more equitable identification processes and as part of our talent development and advanced academics. And we look forward to sharing the progress of this planning with district leadership and the board.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trina. Our next slides are around advanced options. And for those of you who are not aware, the advanced options are at the middle level. They're a middle level program, and they're offered to students in those grades 7th and 8th. And they are providing more depth or complexity in the assignments that we are providing to our students, and really trying to get them used to and I guess available to try in more of a safe environment to try some more difficult and more challenging assignments, so that when students get to those high school courses like AP courses and things, they understand the challenge and have been able to practice and work through some of those things. We began in the areas of English and science back in the fall of 2016, and we've expanded them to include now this year a social study. Well, actually last year we had started it, but then the pandemic hit. So we have started with social studies and have done a pilot with them and have some more wider implementation plans for next fall. Also coming next fall will be RAM's Math 7, which is a new course, and they will be beginning the course with advanced options to begin that school year with that course. So looking at the data, it is representative of students in the 7th and 8th grade who have completed at least one advanced option. So it is unduplicated data that you are looking at. And this is 3 years worth of data that we've been able to track back from 2017, 2018 school year through this year. And I did put in the data just kind of the asterisk because obviously 2019, 2020 was a school year that was interrupted. And the data was accurate up until second try and then has a very different experience. We did provide some AOs in that third try of last year, but it was really in that move to distance learning more difficult to convert some of those assignments to virtual learning and distance learning for our students. So I did put a little asterisk because it's hard to compare that exactly to those other years. Again, we do have at the bottom the representation of our student groups, which includes our Alaskan Native, American Indian, Alaska Native, Asian Pacific Islander students, Hispanic students, Black, white, students of color, and multiracial students. And this is the first year that we have been tracking for our multiracial as a category. So that also slightly changes the data set from the previous years, making it a little bit more difficult to compare them directly. So if you look actually at the students of color group, that is a group that would be inclusive of all of those students of color groups, as well as American Indian and Alaska Native students. And you can see that that multiracial group is overrepresented. So you do see declines this year in our Asian students, Hispanic and Black students, as it pulled students from those groups, as well as our American Indian, Alaska Native students who didn't have enough student counts to publicly report them as well. So again, the best long-term look, I guess I would have to say, would be the students of color group over time, because that one has stayed stable. And you do see within that group a slight underrepresentation, and with white students that are slightly over represented. But in this 2019, 2020 data, you do see that we had 316 students overall, and they completed 2,650 advanced options. And I'll pass it on to Dr. Lake.
Thank you, Jake. For activities this evening, our focus is on grades 7 through 12. Activities are grouped into 4 categories: academic groups, athletics, clubs, and fine arts. There are 4 categories. However, one could argue that the academic groups and clubs are easily interchangeable. The next slide gives you an example of our secondary activities. Again, it's amazing the amount of student opportunities that exist grades 7 through 12. This is a nod not only to the diverse interests of our students, but also the ability of our teachers and staff to support this wide variety of interests. Next, we'll take a look at the activities categories summaries. Again, this is a duplicated student count. There are many, many students who participate in more than one activity. And again, if you grouped academic activities and clubs, this would represent 27% of the categories. And in terms of over and under representation in activities, this graph represents a 3-year trend with a significant disruption in trimester 3 of last school year. Also, this means that our largest and most diverse student activity was not offered, and this would be boys and girls track, 7 through 12. It's difficult to compare the previous 2 years to 1920 because of the cancellation of spring activities last year. Also, we added multiracial students as a category to be more inclusive. That changes the percentage of student groups by race, which involves decreases in American Indian and Hispanic students. The students of color overall includes American Indian, Asian, Black, Hispanic, and multiracial students, and this number has been stable and allows for some comparison through the years. I do want to mention that Mr. Hornung and our 7th through 12 staff continue to work towards a greater representation in all activities for our students of color. Finally, historical obstacles include transportation and cost of participation. This is not while in school, but the developmental years leading up to participating primarily in secondary athletics. Thank you, and Ms. Phila is next.
Actually, I am going to present the slides, and then Ms. Phil is able to help support me as I go through some of the data and information as well. So this first slide is just around initial referrals for special education. And just so that folks have a background in what initial referrals are, it's just students who have met that criteria, that initial criteria to possibly be evaluated for special education. So students that have been referred may or may not meet the criteria or qualify for specialized services or instruction based on that evaluation. Also, the team might determine that the student, they won't even follow along with that referral and may refer them back to continuing more interventions in the classroom. And we do monitor the data looking for who is being referred to special education, in particular looking for student groups that are over or under represented in the data. So looking at our data from last year, from 1920, most of our student groups were more representative than the 2018 school year. We did see that Black student referrals continued to decrease from that 2017 18 school year. And we also saw an increase in Asian student referrals toward a more proportionate amount. We also added that multiracial category this year, so that impacts some of the direct comparisons between those students groups by race in those past years. We do continue to have that all students of color group, which remains a little bit more stable and provides a comparison over the years. However, looking at that, just at that students of color group can be very deceiving because there is a lot of variance between our racial groups. And it does, if you would only present that information, looks like we're not over or underrepresented at all. But when you look at the variance between our student groups, you can see a lot of variance. You do notice that our American Indian and Alaskan Native line is actually all the way on the bottom. That is because there were no referrals last year for that student group. And our next slides are around the participation of students who are actually served in special education. So the ones prior to this were the ones who were referred to special education. And these are the ones, students that are currently served, or served last year, I should say, and receiving specialized instruction or services. So that's the difference between these two slides. So in looking at the data, we do find that the students of color group overall shows that a proportional amount are served in special education. Again, you do see that variance between the groups. And so that's why it's important when we look at each of our student groups by race. You'll notice that our American Indian students were overrepresented last year in special education, whereas our Asian students were underrepresented. Our multiracial students continue to be overrepresented in the data, but declined from previous years. So it is important for us to continue to monitor our student groups to see where our actions should be focused. You will notice also with the American Indian student group that it has a tendency to go up and down quite a bit because it is a smaller group of students, and they're therefore a little bit more able to go up and down in the data that you'll notice. So we are available for questions or further discussion that you'd like to have. We appreciate your time this evening, and all of my colleagues are available as well as I. And we can probably go back to non-sharing view as well. Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you, Trina, for navigating us through that.
So thank you, Director Vondelinda and Karen and Jenny. And Trina, any questions or comments, fellow board members, for the group? Curtis.
Okay, this is to whoever wants it. There's the new class of so you have multiracial students now. Are multiracial students wrapped into the students of color group also, or do they? Could you tell me? Could you explain what the difference between those two categories are?
Yeah. So historically we had always reported a students of color group, and that was all of our what we considered our students of color and our American Indian, Alaskan Native students. And so some of those students would be the same as those students that are represented by the other individual categories of student groups. So the multiracial group are students that have asked to be identified by 2 or more races. And so that is a group that we hadn't always presented on, and that is something that we're changing in our practices as we present more and more data to the board. So you could fall into both of those groups, and that's how that's represented, I guess.
So to clarify for me then, because I'm slow. So students of color so students who choose to be identified as multiracial would then also automatically be within the students of color category?
Correct.
But not vice versa, obviously. Okay. All right. And then students would also include kids who identify as a particular single non-white and/or American Indian, Alaskan Native group.
So what you could do is actually, I could just take off that students of color group, because that's just all of those student groups lumped together. Those are all the same students, and we wouldn't have to report that, but multiracial students would be a category that we would need to report, because those are students who have either their families or they identify with more than one race. So I don't know if I'm making sense on it. I don't feel like I'm connecting on that with you, but it's one of our student group populations that we report on now, just like we would for reporting for Black students, white students, Asian students, whereas we don't always report on students of color group altogether. That's just another metric really that we look at over time to kind of give us that same comparison.
So I would say that the students of color group would be a composite group.
Yes.
Whereas the other group is really extracted from individual racial groups.
Thanks, Karen. That was the verbiage I was looking for.
It's a distinct identification. It's a distinct identification. So yeah, I get that. Correct. And I understand, Jake, that the surmise could be that the students of color group being a composite or an aggregate does muddy it, because the importance is the different specific categories within that. And if you blend them together, they might come close to one, but that's kind of a meaningless false sense of one.
Exactly. And that's what I think it's important to note too, is just that there is, we did in the past just sometimes report only students of color as a full group. And so I think it is important for us to to see that there is a lot of variance within those student groups.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, follow up. Okay. Thank you. That actually does clarify a lot for me. And I kind of thought that's where it was going, but I just wanted to be sure. Special education. So you showed some very interesting information, the referrals for special education versus participation in special education. The question I have is there are there numbers that might show people who were breakout of students who were referred to special education, but then did not participate in special education for whatever reason? It could be they were referred and they got there and there's like, well, no, you actually don't belong here. You belong over here. You get kicked back into a different intervention or whatever. I just think I'd just be curious about the representation or over or underrepresentation of students that did not participate, who were referred but did not participate for whatever reason, not as a got you kind of thing, but just curious. So if that's something that's does that make sense? Or
So I think what you're asking is, are there students who are referred who are then not identified through the evaluation process as being eligible for specific special education services? And what happens to those students then at that point in time? Is that an accurate?
Well, for the most part, I'm just curious about that. I think it was Jake who had mentioned, and if it's not, then I'm sorry. That there were some students that were referred and then did not
Qualify.
Participate, qualify. Whatever the specific language is.
Yes.
And so I'm curious about the makeup of those kids. And so, if it's such a small number that it doesn't make a difference, then fine. I get that. So, but I'm just curious if it's possible to tease that out.
We can certainly look back and examine that information. Primarily, there are such strict criteria for being able to determine eligibility for a specific special education area, that it typically is that the student does not qualify based on those criteria. What happens with those students, though, there are two different processes in each school where they really are examining if they are not eligible for that special education services, what kinds of support are then needed in order to help that student manage whatever it is that was the referring that caused the referral in the first place. So we do not attend to that population. Now, if you are interested in learning about who that population is,
that's what if I inferred that these kids were not being taken care of, then I apologize. That was not where I was going. It literally was trying to understand who this population is.
And so I do not have that information, but if that's of interest to you, we can certainly collect that.
Yeah.
And I guess my follow-up, Karen, to that would be, how do we have many students that are referred that are not qualifying for special education?
I would guess that between 10 and 15% of the students that are referred are not eligible for services.
So and who does the referring?
Parents, staff, students themselves.
So I guess to add on to Curtis's question, I would also be interested in knowing if that 10 to 15% is itself over or underrepresented among some of these groups.
We're
Just to get
starting
it.
to examine that. One of the questions we've asked is there a difference in the students of color that are referred, particularly for emotional, social, behavioral issues by staff than are referred by parents? And we are beginning to see some evidence that that is true. I don't have enough data to substantiate that. It's just kind of preliminary questions, but we are thinking that as we, with our own lens, interpret behavior, we are interpreting it differently than a parent would.
Yep. Kitty.
Karen, could you comment on what you have found effective or what has changed that has helped us bring closer together the over and underrepresentation of different groups in the referral process?
I would say that what has made a difference has been mindset change. And I would also say that our assessment procedures have changed. And I would also, and I think what makes the greatest amount of difference is in this referral process. As we continue the work in all aspects of general education, I see our staff and particularly our staff are referring fewer students because our administration in our schools and our staff themselves are really paying much greater attention to some of the cultural differences in the kinds of students that they might be referring and the interpretation of behavior. Plus, I think the other big issue is we've reoriented ourselves to such an extent. From the time I was here in my last visit with Roseville to now, what I see is such an emphasis on restorative practices. Those restorative practices have made a huge amount of difference in how we see and interpret academic and behavioral performance.
Thank you very much.
Other questions or thoughts for the group? Frank.
Thank you. I'm interested to know, Trina, about the local norming. Just what is that, and why do you think it's going to perhaps solve our problem?
Thank you. Local norming is very different than national norms. Our gifted program is not a national program, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to use national norms. It's better to compare our students to the students who they interact with and who they work with. So, for example, when we informally identify students, we use a teacher rating scale called the HOPE scale. And the results from that HOPE scale, where teachers are looking for certain behaviors that might indicate a need for advanced academics, we use local norms, which means that, for example, if we're looking at the second grade at Central Park, we norm the data to the second graders at Central Park only. And we also can use, part of local norming can be group norming. So we can tease out students who qualify for EL services as well as who qualify for free and reduced meals, which are two groups that are extremely under-identified in gifted education, and we can compare them to just those groups. So from within those groups, which students are appearing to have needs outside of the core curriculum, and you'd see that much more accurately with local norms. So it really means school norms and grade level norms overall in our district. Did that answer? fully.
That helps. But if you just, so the first part of your answer where you said that you would have the local norm for the school, I'm not sure how that would help in that you would still have the representation being not proportional. But if you do the norming within particular groups, I can see how that could work very nicely. I was going to sort of move on to observing, I think from your presentation a couple weeks ago, that primarily the gifted and talented program in the elementary school is in clustering. And it seems like there shouldn't be any problem making sure that the clusters are representative within a school. Have you thought about that, or is that, do you think that local norming might address that?
I feel strongly that local norming will address it. That's what we found in kindergarten through second grade. The reason that we don't use it in the upper grades is that when we screen, we universally screen, as I said, with an ability test. And the screener that we use with all students, so 100% unless students or their families are opting out of the testing, 100% of our third and fifth graders take the screener. And then from that, about 30% of the students take the complete test. So when you only have a subset of students taking an assessment, you can't use local norms because it's not all of the students. So if we were to give the full test to all of the students, then we could. But that's a big investment, and I think our task group needs to look at that and decide, is that an investment that is worthy of the programming that we want to offer? As you indicated, we have clustering that doesn't have a limit in seats. You know, we can identify students who we feel like need more within curriculum and instruction through clustering. So we'll work out all those details, but I do feel strongly, and I know Jake and I have talked about this at length, that I think this will make a big impact.
Thank you.
Others? Looks like none. Well, Todd. If we can't hear you, Todd, if you're talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, guys. I know I'm having technical difficulties tonight. Karen, sorry, I just wanted to go back quick to special education referrals. I just thought that was really interesting. I don't think I knew that students could refer themselves. Just kind of curious on how that process works with the student. Do they request like an accommodation for themselves, or admit they're struggling, or go to the teacher? Just curious how that works, and are there a lot of students that refer themselves?
I wouldn't say there are a lot of students that refer themselves, but they can do that through their counselor, their social worker, or their teacher. And sometimes a parent will encourage a student to task themselves to come forward and ask for what kind of support they might need.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Looks like none. Well, thank you all. Again, this is a very important thing to keep track of. We're very interested in this. Obviously, it's at the heart of the entire value we have around equity, and making sure that, you know, kids are ideally, you know, as close to 1.0 represented as possible. It's going to be some, you know, normal variation. You know, it looks like there's some progress in some areas, and I myself will be curious to see how things turn out next year, and whether there were any anomalies caused by the pandemic year in any of this that we're doing. Yeah. You know, where we're headed from there. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Jake. Thank you all.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to our next non-action item, which is the first reading of policy 560. And I believe Business Director Sherry Thompson is taking us to this.
Yes, and I'll be covering for Director Thompson this evening. She's with her mother, so we wish her and her family the best as we all review these first three policies.
Thank you very much.
So per Sherry's guidance, we're recommending no changes to policy 560 in district transfer.
Any questions or comments on this one from the board? Frank?
And you're on mute, Frank?
Now, I will say, I just need to bring it up on my screen, and I've had a bunch of time now while I was on mute to do that. And here it comes. I was just wondering if the consideration, so when a student asks to be moved, or there's request for a transfer within, we talk about the educational impact of the individual student and the receiving school. We don't talk about the leaving school. Is there a consideration in that when a student is leaving a particular school? And to what extent are these denied?
I can write down the question and share that and process it with Sherry and bring it back to you. In my experience working with the principals, they're not frequently denied in any manner. We attempt, if there's room in classrooms and in buildings, we honor those transfer requests.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Looks like none. So then we'll just ask potentially that question be answered or verified, I guess, the answer verified, then Dr. Lake for the second reading.
Sure. Yep.
Thanks. With that, let's move on to the next one, which is policy 564, non-resident student attendance.
Thank you. We are recommending a couple of minor changes. First, if you refer to the bottom of page 2, section 1.2.4, and primarily on the top of page 3, this is a reference to MDE's online application and their language that they're suggesting. Second recommendation is page 4, section 1.2.6 and 1.2.6.2, with the addition of providing preference to children of school district staff. And maybe I'll pause if there's any questions in that regard. Frank?
Right.
So as I read this, I have to say that this is on the bottom of page, at 1.2.4, putting in instructions on how to use the MDE website seems dumb because it's not going to work that way next year. So it'll be a different page, everything will be different. So I wouldn't want to have that there. I think you could just say on their website, period. And then it's up to the person to go to the website, but under school choice, students and families, it's not going to be that way in 6 weeks.
I agree. I'll bring that forward to Sherry, meaning you wouldn't want to change that reference year after year after year.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah, that's a good catch. And I would say even saying education.mn.gov, just say, Frank, if I'm understanding you correctly, your suggestion is just say available on their website, period.
exactly.
Any other thoughts or suggested tweaks? Kitty?
I'm not sure you can answer this, Dr. Lake, but what's driving the desire to change around district staff? And we haven't had that in the past. Are we getting more requests? Are there different things in consideration that we haven't considered in the past? I mean, what's driving the change?
Yeah, again, I won't provide a clear answer, but I'll write down your question, and I understand that's a recommendation or guidance from MDE. But I will follow up and we'll have that answer for you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
The last suggested revision is on page 5, section 2.2, And the recommendation is to strike through the entire section. We no longer run this program and haven't offered it in 5 years, and it comes at considerable cost to the district as well.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments? Thank you. Go on to the third one. Policy 584, collection, maintenance, use, of student education data.
Thank you. We're recommending no changes to policy 584 minus the strike through of an S in Roseville area schools in the very first sentence. Our attorney has recommended significant changes to the regulations, and we're in the midst of making those changes, but none to the policy.
Questions, thoughts? Looks like we're good on this one. So thank you very much. We'll look forward to the second reading.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move to our next non-action item, which has to do with the naming of the Education Center and the High School Performing Arts Center. And Superintendent Sicoli, I believe you are going to introduce this topic to us this evening. You're on mute, sir.
Thank you for the assistance there. So at the school board work study session on September 10th of 2019, the school board expressed interest in naming 2 new facilities that were and are under construction. And that is the new building that's going up on the current Fairview education site, and also the new Performing Arts Center at Roseville Area High School that is still under construction. And so we're bringing forth some names for consideration that are in alignment with the discussion from September 10th, 2019. And so when I'm done with these introductory comments, I'll be turning it over to Dr. Faber and others, including representatives from the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, because one of the things expressed in September 10th was the recognition that our district center and our community are located on land that was seized from the Dakota people. And so that we would want to pay tribute to the Dakota and Ojibwe people of Minnesota. And we worked with the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee to come up with a suitable name for the site. And the other, regarding the Performing Arts Center at Roseville Area High School, in September of 2019, the school board expressed interest in naming it after Dr. John Tyne, longtime superintendent here at Roseville Area Schools. And he was superintendent for 17 years, from 1998 to 2015, one of the longest serving superintendents in our district, along with Emmett D. Williams, who has an elementary school named after him, and Lloyd C. Nielsen, who has the current Performing Arts Center at Roseville Area High School named in his honor. So to honor the contribution of the district, we are bringing forth that name for consideration. Now, further discussion regarding this will occur at the March 16th, 2021 school board work study session, to then presumably be followed with a formal recommendation to the school board at the March 30th school board meeting. And it is somewhat time sensitive, given that to get occupancy, we do need to have some signage on by a certain date, and it takes some time to get that signage. And I also want the recognition here that we had intended to be further along in this process and bring this to the board earlier, but the pandemic has created challenges associated with that, you know, some of which involve getting American Indian elders to the site under consideration, very important part of the process. And that is hard to do when, you know, older people in our community are at risk with a worldwide pandemic. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Faber and others.
Thank you, Dr. Sicoli. Board Chair Boguszewski, board members, Superintendent Sicoli, which I should say happy birthday, by the way, and guests and team. Thank you for being here. I'd like to introduce today Dante El Shabazz, who, along with Rhonda Russo and Lily Miller, is going to walk us through our American Indian programming here in Roseville. Deontay.
Good evening, Board Chair Member Bobushevsky, board members, and Superintendent Sokoli. I'm the American Indian Program Coordinator, and I'm a member of the federally recognized tribe, Omaha Tribe in Nebraska. This evening, we will discuss the American Indian Program. I'd like to introduce Rhonda Russo. She is a parent and the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee Chairperson, and Lily Miller. She is American Corps of Vista volunteer. Before we begin, I would like to read a land acknowledgement that has been created by Harambe Principal Delon Smith. This is read before Harambe staff meetings. This is American Indian Education Program in action. I want to acknowledge that no matter where most of us are currently located in the United States, most of us spend today and every day on land stolen from indigenous and cultivated by the enslaved community. It is essential to understand the long-lasting history that has brought us to reside and benefit from this land, and to seek to understand our place within the history of genocide, enslavement, settler colonialism, and racism. Land and enslavement acknowledgements do not exist in the past, tense, or historical context. Settler colonialism and white supremacist ideology is a current, ongoing, and cultural systematic need. We need to build the mindfulness of our present participation in the placement of the need. We will now present the American Indian Program, and I would like to start off with the past actions Roseville Area Schools has taken. Each staff meeting, we includes negative images of mascots. Also, we discussed the naming of the new building, as far as the Fairview site, the building name. We came up with that also. And set clear guidelines and expectations for smudging practices.
Hi, good
Deontay,
evening.
we're having some problems with your microphone, just so you know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, good evening. I don't know if anybody can, do you guys hear me okay?
You're just fine.
Thank you. I'm Rhonda Russo. I'm the chair. Good evening. I like to present some updates. So in front of you, I just want to share that we have a $25,000 increase in our American Indian Education Aid from the MDE. The total aid amount for the 2021 grant is now $75,490. The aid determined by number of identified students in the district. Number of identified American Indian students is 174. We hired 2 American Indian education staff, so 1 full-time coordinator and 1 part-time cultural liaison. And we are also working in collaboration with the Minnesota Humanities Center for Professional Development with an American Indian focus. And so the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee recommendation to the school board for the naming of the building, the proper pronunciation is Ambetu Techa Education Center.
Rhonda, can you say that one more time? And let's see if the board can practice with us today. If the board can practice a pronunciation today. Really appreciate you, Rhonda, taking the time to make sure we're saying this appropriately. But I'd love to have the board just join in with the pronunciation.
Sure,
Yes.
I'll start. I'm not shy. Adbetu techa. Adbetu techa. Correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that means basically new day, that abetu means sun or day, and techa means young or new. And so you get a sense of a day that is newly beginning, or a new day. Is that true?
Betu, yeah. So the P is actually kind of pronounced like a hard, like betu. You want to say like a hard P or B, almost in a sense.
Got it.
Yeah.
Abetu. Abetu. Thank you.
Betu, techa.
Thank you. Fellow board members, who's next?
Betu Techa.
Anbetu Techa.
Anbetu Techa.
Betu Techa.
Alberto Techa.
Correct. I'm proud of you. Yes. And I bet you it's day.
Well, and I'll just share. I think that this isn't just, interesting and fun. I think that we'll have many opportunities to talk about the new facility in the future, and we want to be able to say it properly and be able to talk it up, and hope a lot of people come and see the beautiful new building that we have going there. So thank you.
Yes, and I just want to clarify. So right here in this slide, this is the actual correct spelling. And so I know in the previous handout, there was a TH. So that is kind of like the new language, but this is the old way. And this is what from the elders, like this is what you're going to see from elders. So
excellent.
Priorities for the 2021 school year, 2020 and 2021 school year. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yeah, coming through great.
All right. Currently, we have all American Indian seniors on track to graduate, so we're at 100% with that. We have the AmeriCorps Promise Fellows that will be tutoring students in grades 7 through 12 who need extra help. That includes the in-person and also on the hybrid, as far as being online. We're looking to increase parent and family engagement. And also we're looking to engage students when the APAC meetings. And then we're working closely with the assistant superintendent to ensure access and information to students and the budget funds for our Indigenous students. Rhonda will talk about the annual compliance.
Okay, so the annual compliances. So the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee's issues a vote and resolution of concurrence. And we discussed this during our meeting last Tuesday. And we voted that everything is in concurrence. There are some things that we would like to request to the school board. And I would like to just mention them. The first one is, so we would like to work closely with the guidance counselors at the high school. And I think it's is it the Fairview High School, to approve online Indigenous language courses that count towards the language requirements. That was our first one. The second one was to improve collaboration with school sites to provide better access to students during the school day. The third one, continue to be intentional with professional development, focusing on American Indian perspectives. The fourth, include informational displays in the new Fairview building so community members understand the meaning behind the building name and learn more on Indigenous culture and history, possibly naming wings after Indigenous tribes or people. The fifth one, collaborate with other agencies to provide mental health and well-being support to American Indian students and families. The sixth, increase the 5 FTE, American Indian Cultural Liaison position to a 1.0 FTE position.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up for questions at this time.
Fellow board members, any questions or comments? Director Johnson.
As the board liaison to the parent group, I don't actually have any questions, just comment or two. I'd like to, first of all, thank Rhonda for her time, her leadership, and for teaching me how to pronounce the new education center before the meeting. So as we discussed, the board's going to take your recommendation. Is going to take your recommendations. We'll go through it, and we will send you a response. So we can't go yay or nay today. So for people watching, that's why we're not talking. That's why we're not saying yes or no to anything tonight, because we literally can't. But we will be responding, be sending you a written response like we've done in the past. And I mentioned this in our last meeting, but I'd like to mention it again. Don't be a stranger, okay? We are here to help, and always feel free to reach out to any of us. Obviously, feel free to reach out to me, Dr. Faber. But we're all open, so you do not have to wait for a year to get to bounce something off of us. So I guess that's it. Just thank you for allowing me to participate in inter meetings, and I've learned a lot, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. So.
Thank you, and I thank everybody for your time and having us this evening.
Great. Kitty, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I was just hoping you could help me understand how does the naming process work? If you could tell us what was done to come up with our new name, or recommended name for the building, so that we could learn a little bit more about how the culturally appropriate way to name a building from your perspective is.
Dante, would you like to share your process on that, of what you did?
Yes, ma'am. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yes.
I reached out to a Dakota instructor at the University of Minnesota. From there, he reached out to his tribe, the Dakota tribe. As many people know, like American Indian, there's different sectors. So, although I'm American Indian, I'm from the Omaha tribe. Rhonda's from Lakota, which is South Dakota. So there's different cultural aspects, but we're one people, but divide up in different sectors. So the instructor reached out to the elders, and it took about a week or so. He said they prayed upon it. And basically they said, with everything going on within the world today, as far as a pandemic, with this new building, it's the start of a new day. And that's how they came up with the name as far as that. So.
Thank you very much.
And then my understanding also is that the elders actually traveled to the building itself too, to kind of do some of that thinking or praying. Is that true, Deontay? I think they did. That's what I heard.
Well, considering the pandemic, the instructor told me that it was kind of hard to get, elders, back and forth to where they need to be as far as doing that process. But he brought it back to them, and they said that, they went there and, prayed about it. And then that's what he came back to me with as far as the naming, when he reached out to his community.
Interesting. Very, very nice. Thank you. Great question, Kitty. Thank you for asking.
And
Any other? Go ahead.
Let me just, originally, yes, that's what they would do. The process is typically we offer tobacco. They typically go into a ceremonial sweat, and they pray. They'll come out. They'll do what they need to do. And that's kind of what the holdup was last year. And that's why everything seemed like it was a drawn out process. Now, what we have been telling Curtis and Dr. Favor is when the time comes to where they come out to the actual structure and bless it, that will be a different process. And so I'm sure, Deontay will probably collaborate with the same individual and then, bring them on board that way. That way we can have the proper blessing and then do it appropriately. So.
And hopefully with the timing, we'll be through some of the restrictions and we'll be able to have a proper kind of on-site ceremony or a more proper on-site ceremony too. Kitty, you had a thought?
No, I wanted to thank you very much for sharing that, but I did have another question as well. I know that over the last few years, we've been able to identify more and more of our students that have an American Indian heritage and qualified us, and that's how we got the additional funding, if I understood correctly. Could you talk about that process and how you go about identifying students who may have heretofore not been identified by the school district?
Yeah, I think I can help with that. Deontay has recently been hired. He's maybe been here a month, so it's great to have him. In the past, what we've done is at the specific sites, our cultural liaisons will go in and have groups. And while they're having those groups and announcing that the groups are going to happen, more and more students are starting to come to the groups because we may have missed them in the enrollment process about being identified. And we go back and fill out the federal forms to make sure that we're identifying our young people appropriately. So that's kind of how the process happens. And that's one way we've gotten the growth. Also, just publicly, I need to say that Rhonda Russo has been incredible with continuing the tradition of the parent committee. We need to continue to grow the committee because as we grow the committee and more parents become aware, then we'll receive more children being involved also. Just another way.
Thank you.
Great questions. Any other questions?
Seeing none, then we can move right on to actually our first action item. And Dr. Faber, I think you're just telling us about this too, right? The transmittal of the resolution and parent committee roster.
All right, Board Chair Boguszewski, board members, superintendent, just building on the presentation that was just had, we're asking for action with the resolution and the transmission of the parent committee names. So we're asking for action around concurrence.
Thank you. Any questions about this step in the process for Dr. Faber or any of our guests from my fellow board members? Seeing none, then I'd entertain a motion to accept.
I move acceptance of the American Indian Education Transmittal of Resolution and Parent Committee roster.
Second.
Second,
I think Rose seconded.
Rose got it.
Beat you to it there, Todd. Any further discussion among us as board members? Seeing none, Clerk Johnson, could you take the vote, please?
Director Chu,
Aye.
Director Anderson,
Aye.
Director Shaw,
Aye.
Treasurer Goggins,
Aye.
Chair Boguszewski,
Aye.
Clerk Johnson definitely votes aye.
Thank you. We have accepted that. And as Director Johnson noted, the requests will be passed along to the proper folks for due consideration. And just as others have said, thank you so much for being here this evening, sitting through some of the earlier items till we got to your subjects. But it's really inspirational to us too as board members, I think, to see the commitment and the dedication and the involvement of parents and folks in the community. And just the degree to which you care about everything we do and help us do things in ways that are more proper and better. So thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the next action item. presentation of superintendent candidates and acceptance of slate of candidates. We have with us again tonight, Dr. Ken Dragseth and Dr. Tony Johns, senior partners at the firm that we've engaged with to help us with the Search School Exec Connect. Ken, are we handing it to you to lead us into what you're sharing with us this evening? And you're on mute, sir.
Here so long. That's good.
There you go.
Well, thank you, Mike, and greetings to the board for having us here tonight. It's great to be at this position. Just a couple things. We're going to present, Tony will present one of the candidates, I'll present the other candidate, and then we will obviously ask for a resolution for approval of the slate, and then the names will become public then for everybody to know. There will also, we'll talk a little bit about the schedule for the next day after we do the approval of the slate, and get any questions that people may have related to that. So let's just begin. Everybody's waiting. So Tony, we had two internal candidates who applied that we got full applications from, and we also are the two candidates that we checked references from a variety of different people that we talked to, and we're going to give you kind of a summary of a little bit about their professional educational background, a little bit of what we found out from the reference calls. So Tony, you go ahead.
Thank you very much. Kitty, I know I told you I wouldn't be here, but I have been able to join after all. This evening, I'm presenting one of the candidates. As you know, we don't use a name, but this candidate has been employed in a district that's a first-ring suburb of the Twin Cities, and she's been in multiple positions. She began as a teacher of Phy-Ed and health for grades 9 to 12, and that was from 1997 to 2004. She was in the largest district in the state as an associate principal and athletic director. And after 3 years, she returned to the suburban district, and she was hired as in a comparable position, associate principal and activities director at the high school. And she served there for 2 years and then was promoted to principal, serving in that role for 8 years until 2017. In 2017, she became an assistant superintendent in the district. Her references comment on her commitment to the district and her numerous roles in the district as solid background. She's known for being task-oriented, hardworking, passionate about education, being supportive of all students, listening well, showing respect to all, and making tough decisions, having good judgment, and treating others with dignity, regardless of what the situation was. As principal, in order to support students, she initiated the AVID program, which is for minority children who have families have never been to college, and other students whose families also have never been to college. And she continued to find ways to fund it as resources grew tight, because the particular district she's in, it has been in a pretty continuous cutting phase. She brings forth policies and practices that support equity and was involved since the formation of the initial equity plan and practice policy and philosophy in the district. She moved forward initiatives to take down barriers so students of color could enroll at AP and college and school classes, and then created a summer program that prepares students to be successful in those classes. It was a couple weeks course to really help them set up what is expected of them. She implemented a restorative justice program, and that was as in regards to some of the difficulties that were going on with a different group of students attending the school in comparison to what the district had been serving in the historically. She teamed up with the College Possible program, which is a community foundational-based program, supported numerous student groups being developed, such as Black Lives Matter, Teams for Human Rights, Pan American Leaders, and Muslim Student Association. as well as Latino and Asian cultural groups. She created a multicultural resource center and cultural liaison structure, among other initiatives. Been an important part of curriculum change and oversees curriculum and has mentored numerous students. She has participated in collaborative relationships with numerous education and community entities, including Intermediate District 916, the Fire, Police, Parks and Recreation, Business Chamber, Rotary, and the Suburban Ramsey Family Collaborative, which serves many students that are homeless and or are at very limited resources. References were very supportive of her ability to be a quality superintendent and that she can lead the community and district forward in the future. Her education includes a Bachelor of Arts from Bemidji State University, Master of Arts in Educational Leadership from St. Mary's University, Minneapolis, an Education Specialist degree in Educational Leadership from the University of St. Thomas, Minneapolis, and Doctor of Education from St. Cloud State University, St. Cloud, Minnesota. Her doctoral dissertation was on supporting students of color to close the achievement gap. And I'll turn it over to Ken to present the other case. You're on mute.
This candidate is currently an assistant superintendent for 2 years in an East Metro Suburban School District. Prior to that position, he was a high school principal in an urban Twin Cities school district for 1 year, and he was also interim superintendent for 1 year in a regional Minnesota center. Prior to that position, he was executive director of student services and schools for 4 years and a high school principal for 6 years in a Northwest Metro Suburban District. He also has been a principal and assistant principal in an urban Twin Cities school district for 6 years, where he was credited with keeping that high school open, and an interim assistant principal for 1 year in a West Metro Suburban District. He began his career as co-director for 3 years of a nonprofit home for children in the Twin Cities. He has also been an adjunct professor at a Twin Cities University and continues to be an adjunct professor for a state university. This candidate is widely known throughout the Twin Cities as a leader in education for all students. He is considered a transformational leader who has led large high schools successfully and moved them forward in academics and equity initiatives. References state that he is the right leader for this historic and challenging times, who has a strong systemic approach to problem solving. References say he is a strong relationship person who has been able to build strong support and connections with staff, students, and community in every district in which he has served. He has turned around high schools, provided interim leadership in a district that was craving positive, collaborative, and strategic leadership. He's provided strong academic achievement and accountability measures in the assistant superintendent role, and provided leadership and equity issues and racism discussions throughout the state. His work in instructional leadership, inclusive education, equity initiatives, achievement gap programs, and district financial issues references say he is an ideal candidate. He is active in the community and community organizations and has strong connections to educational and social organizations, metro and statewide. References state that his great ability to listen productively to all stakeholders, engage them in meaningful action to improve the social, emotional, and academic abilities of students. He is perceived as calm, positive, insightful, and creative in his approach to decision-making. References further state that he is a doer who gets things done and holds programs and staff accountable. One reference has said he is a rare combination of heart and brains. All references state that he's ready to lead the Roseville area schools to greater heights, and all stakeholders in the district will be served exceptionally well under his leadership. As one reference stated, I trusted my child to his leadership, compassion, and vision, and the child thrived in that school. In conclusion, his references all state their high admiration for his skills and background, and hope to continue his leadership journey leading the Roseville area schools. His education includes a Doctor of Education and a 6th-year degree from St. Cloud State University, a Master of Education from Hamline University, and a Bachelor of Science degree from North Dakota State University. In addition, he has a superintendent certificate from St. Cloud State University and a Director of Special Ed certificate from Minnesota State University, Mankato. His doctoral dissertation was on mentorship of select African-American school administrators. And so these are the two recommended candidates.
So Ken and Tony, I just know I myself listened as attentively as I possibly could. But that being said, will we get a written copy of what you both just summarized?
Oh, you can
Yes,
if you would.
we will send that to Michelle and she can distribute it to the board.
Great, I think that'd be very helpful, just so we have that, so we can document, because I did not write it down. And there's a lot of good information.
We didn't expect it to, no.
No, and we'll be glad to provide that to you. Yes.
Got it. And then just to clarify for those who are watching or may not be familiar with the process. So we've basically been presented these candidates anonymously, and our task is now to accept both or one or none of them based on what we've heard, right? And once they are accepted, then their names can be known. And I believe there's also even been some work already behind the scenes to set up the interview process with these candidates, presuming that there could be an acceptance this evening. Is that true?
Yes.
That's correct.
And then those are the interviews that early on today, Director Goggins thanked Michelle Tessum for helping set up, because I believe those will be happening tomorrow with the various focus groups. May I ask, were there applicants whom you did not deem qualified to get to this point?
No internal candidates other than that we would.
Thank you. And then I guess, fellow board members, what I'd ask is if we have questions or comments for Ken or Tony, we can do those, and then we'll need a motion to accept up to both of the candidates as presented in a second, and then we could discuss further if we want to and take the vote to accept. So with that, any questions before such a motion for Ken and Tony about the process or anything else? Looks like none. Oh, Todd?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again, Ken and Tony, for presenting those candidates. I did have an interesting question. I was at one of my curriculum advisory committee meetings last night, and I received a great question of kind of more of a process question. The candidates will become obviously public, and I know there's going to be a bunch of interviews tomorrow. If any member of the public, or if there's any stakeholder groups that, let's say there's a renewed interest, or the candidates are now public, or any feedback that comes through, what do we do? Should those? I mean, how would I advise, or how would we advise people to send a comment to the board, or send it still to one of you two, or just what do we do with any future potential stakeholder comments or thoughts?
If after the candidates remain public, then I think it's very appropriate to send it to whatever your board designated person is, of which then they would, either to Michelle or, so that it can be distributed to the board. So you can do that within the board process. So if someone wants to email, the board, do it like you would normally, handle any board correspondence.
Got it. And then if someone sends it to only one of us on the board, then that individual who received it should feel free to share it with the rest of us on the board.
You should probably send it to Michelle to then distribute it.
To then distribute
But you've
it.
got that process.
Got it. So if we see via the sender that it has already gone to all of us, then we need to do nothing further with it. But if we see that it's come to, for example, only myself, then I would send that to Michelle for distribution. Is it typical that you, as the firm helping us, would eventually want all of those recommendations sent to you for some kind of documentation and retention? Or no, if it comes to all of us on the board, we don't need to forward it to you?
We do not need it. Right.
Okay, thank you. Todd, great question. Thank you. Other questions? If not, then I would entertain a motion around approval of none, one, or both of the candidates presented?
I make a motion that we approve the slate of candidates.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion among ourselves? Looks like none. Clerk Johnson, could you take, oh, I'm sorry, Director Goggins.
I just wanted a clarifying question. Do I correctly understand that the board will receive, once this is public information, will receive a packet on each candidate of reading material?
Yes, you will
Yes,
receive a
I delivered today to Michelle full packets for both candidates, and I believe that she has copied them. And I think, Michelle, you can jump in here, but I think they're going to be available tonight, right?
They are scanned, ready to go, and after this motion, I can work on getting them out.
And that packet, for your information, includes the application that they completed online with us, any letters of reference, their transcripts from graduate school, their letter of interest in the position, their resume, and then anything else they may have chosen to include. So it'll be a fair packet.
Thank you. And those are physical packets?
I figured the best way to get them to you quickly would be electronically, so they'll be posted in your board portal.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, then moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, Director Johnson, could you take the vote, please?
Yes. Director Anderson.
Aye.
Director Shaw.
Aye.
Director Chu. Rose?
I think you're on mute, Rose.
Aye. I said it.
Treasurer Goggins.
Aye.
Chair Boguszewski.
Aye.
Clerk Johnson votes aye.
Thank you. Cool. So do we get informed now verbally as to who the candidates are officially?
You get informed right now, yes. The two candidates are Dr. Jennifer Lake and Dr. Michael Faber. And those two will be on schedule tomorrow. And maybe Tony wants to talk about the schedule a little bit, or I can do that too.
Ken, I just printed that schedule out when I got here and I haven't reviewed it, the revised one,
Right.
because of the day where I was
That's
today.
fine. You've been busy today, so
Yeah,
let me
it's been a tough day.
starting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. It has. Starting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, there will be focus groups with each of the candidates. There are 5 focus groups that are going to occur during the day. The first one in the morning will be with parents and community group. And then in the afternoon, we will have an administrative group. We'll have a support staff group. We'll have a teacher group, and we'll have a student group. And the process for each of these is that these will be Zoom, and Tony and I will monitor these. The candidate will be asked to give, 5 to 7 minutes, a little bit about themselves. One of the things we always say to internal candidates is that a lot of times they assume everybody knows them, but in reality, they may know a little about them, but they may not know as much as they would like to share. So we want them to share a little bit about themselves, and then we open it to questions from each of the group. And those questions are, some groups may determine what those questions are going to be. Some will be open to the group. Depends on what each group wants to do. We don't determine that. So once they interview, this will be a 45-minute focus group. At the end of that time, everybody who's in that focus group is asked to fill out a form that will ask basically, how does this person match with the profile? So the people in the focus groups will have the profile, and then they'll have these questions. And first one is, how do you think they match up with the profile we're looking for? And then the second one basically is, how do you think it, relates to the community and different stakeholders? And then any other questions or concerns you want to share with the board. So after each of those things, Michelle is the the master of this. She's going to make sure you get all of these by the end of the day. And you will have time prior to, so the focus groups will end roughly at about 5:30. No board members will be involved in those focus groups. These will be just the focus groups themselves. The evening then, there will be 2 interviews, one at 6:30 and one at 8. At 6:30 will be Dr. Lake, and at 8 o'clock will be Dr. Favor. And I made the order of that just on a flip of the coin, so that's what happened. So that is the order we'll have, okay? And then at the end of those interviews, the board will determine whether they feel they have a candidate they want to move forward with or want to do something different. So we will take you through that process at the end of that evening. So they've got a full day tomorrow, both candidates, and you should get a lot of good feedback from all the different groups. Did I missed something, Tony?
No, you didn't. You did well.
Well, we have a
Oh,
couple questions.
One of the things, I'm sorry, I did just think of something. You will be coming early to the board to set yourself up for the interview, because you will be getting all the feedback. So you have set out, I think, in your schedule between all of you, an opportunity to sit and review the feedback that has been done during the day by all of the focus groups that they met with. And that will inform you too, as you prepare.
The other question we have, we got a couple just procedural questions that we need the board to determine. One is, should the candidates, can the candidates be at home for their Zoom meetings? Number one. And then number two, are you interviewing them either Zoom, or are you interviewing them in person at the district office?
So
let's take those two first.
Yeah, so I believe Zoom can, and for the simple technical reason that I personally am physically present in the boardroom at the district center. However, in the past, when we've tried to have, for example, Dr. Scully and I in the same room, Zooming in, there's feedback issues, et cetera. So it actually would work better technically if the candidate is not physically present in the boardroom with me. And so I personally don't care where they Zoom in from, but I think we're looking at a Zoom process, since all the board members except myself, I think, will be attending via Zoom also.
Okay, that's great. So it makes no difference to, Jenny or Mike, you can pick your own, wherever you want to be tomorrow. As far as the focus groups is up to you, okay? And you'll Zoom in. And then, as I understand it then, for the interview, likewise for tomorrow night.
Right. Can I have a question about the focus groups? So will the questions be proctored in any way? In other words, will they be submitted to you via chat and then you ask them, or will the participants be able to directly ask questions? Because in my own personal professional experience, it could be some risk involved in persons thinking of questions kind of ad hoc and just throwing them out there. That may or may not, be in the direction you want to go.
What we have found is that it works very well to first talk to the group for a moment about the process of what will happen during the 45 minutes they're together with the candidate, and what we want them to think about on the profile as they're listening to responses. But we tell them what they can't ask. But we have really been impressed by the questions that people ask. And we have very, very seldom ever had to step in and say, excuse me, that's a question that you shouldn't ask. Or this topic that we know it's a serious issue in your district, but this candidate doesn't probably have enough information to respond to that at this point. And so we really don't have a problem with it. And the questions are really very good. So we will, we'll be there. We'll be watching and listening.
Oh, yeah. Kitty
will be a part of the process.
I just wanted to comment that on several occasions, as people have been talking, they refer to the profile. And I just wanted the community to be aware that the profile being referred to is the superintendent profile, which was pulled together by the consultants based on the input from the community. So it's kind of what we've deemed as a community is important to a new superintendent. And then everybody's using that same profile as a determination of what kind of questions to ask. But I just want to put in context because we've been using that because we know what it's about, but I'm not sure all the viewers do.
In between the online survey that community people filled out and some staff members, we had about 800 responses there, and we had another 100 people that we met with, about 100. So there is a wide range of input and a very robust group of people from the community, et cetera, that responded to the survey. And their comments were very well written and very thoughtful.
Thank you.
So that is, we're all ready to go tomorrow. So, we're looking forward to the day and looking forward to working with Jenny and Mike in this process.
Great. Well, thank you, Ken, and thank you, Tony, for helping us thus far through the process. And tomorrow will be a busy, but busy, important day for all of us. So thank you.
And may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I understand it's possible that you would be streaming the interviews as they happen. Is it possible that with the board, the interview with the board, is that accurate?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we will formally convene an open meeting, and then it will be live streamed, just like the regular board meetings. It'll be live streamed and via the website. It'll be YouTube, and it'll be broadcast through the local CTV channel.
So we would probably ask Mike to refrain from being a part of that meeting just because the questions are going to be similar to two. And I'm sure that's no problem.
They're going to be exactly the same questions. And so we will make certain that neither candidate hears the other candidate's interview, because we just don't want anybody, for transparency, to think that anything happened.
Sure. Any other further questions or comments or thoughts? Ken, we're going to say something or just?
No, I just say, well, we'll see all of you tomorrow.
Great.
And we look forward to it.
And thank you. And I want to say too,
Thank
that
you.
the people that we've worked with in the district, you had a subcommittee of Rose and Kitty and Michelle. They have been just outstanding in helping us in this shortened process. So thank you.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks very much.
All right, good night.
Okay.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Good
With that,
night.
we'll move on to our next item, which is an update from Superintendent Sicoli with some potential revisions that he is bringing us to consider this evening to the learning model. Superintendent, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Boguszewski. So Governor Walz's February 17th announcement introduced updated guidelines for transitioning secondary students back to blended or in-person learning. And among the updates included in the Safe Learning Plan were that beginning February 22nd, secondary schools were allowed to transition to blended or in-person learning model if they're able to implement additional mitigation strategies. Districts that had already announced a plan to transition to blended or in-person learning could continue with those plans or adapt those plans based on this new guidance. We were in that category. We had communicated a plan to our community prior to that. A rolling start is no longer required for multi-grade transition. So a couple things associated with that. It means that no longer was there a requirement to wait 2 weeks to bring in the next band of students into a given school. And then also, no longer was there a requirement for a maximum of 3 grade levels at one time in a given school. You could have more students come back than that. Also in there was 6 feet of physical distance must be maintained between students whenever feasible. However, when 6 feet of distancing cannot be maintained, a minimum of 3 feet of physical distance between students must be maintained. Now, although the governor's announcement on February 17th diminished the importance of county case rate levels, COVID-19 case rate levels, there was a caveat that if county level data is between 0 and 10 cases, as a 14-day case rate per 10,000 people, that no minimum amount of physical distancing is required, but that schools must continue to create and encourage as much distancing as feasible. So, we continue to believe that our collaborative planning process and the 3 planning days for staff are important to effectively implement a return to learning at our secondary school sites. We have not had large numbers of students in our secondary schools for 11 months. And so we feel that a hybrid approach at this time will allow us to see what is working when they transition back with our mitigation strategies and what needs to be changed. And although we are now allowed to bring back more than 3 grade levels at a time, we feel it's prudent to bring back 9th graders before other grades at Roseville Area High School to acclimate them to a new school building, which is also under construction, which provides some additional challenges with social distancing and movement of students, and to safely implement mitigation strategies. Also preparing for moving large amounts of materials over spring break from curriculum areas due to construction is a reason, along with the end of trimester task, to wait to bring back 9th graders at the trimester break as we had planned, rather than bringing them into the school with 1 week left in the trimester, which would be this next week. Now, the elimination of the rolling start requirement that I referenced allows us to bring back 10th to 12th graders sooner than previously planned. And indeed, that is the part of our recommendation that is a change from the earlier plan approved by the board. So the school board approved our learning model plan for our grades 7 to 12 students at its February 9th meeting. And that was to bring back grades 7 to 9 students on March 15th and grades 10 to 12 on March 29th. So here tonight, we're recommending, as was the case, 7th to 9th grade students on March 15th, immediately after our spring break and the start of the 3rd trimester, but moving up the timeline by 1 week for grade 10 to 12 students from March 29th to March 22nd. So that is the recommendation we'd like the board to consider tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent. Questions, thoughts, comments? For Aldo. Curtis.
Just point of clarification. We've had this conversation before, but for the people who are watching, the moving up in schedule of 1 week is not going to impact teachers' ability to, be ready to go.
We do not believe that is the case, as all the preparation days will be done prior to the first group of students moving in on March 15th.
Okay, great. That's why I want everybody to know. Thank you.
Other questions? Frank.
Dr. Sicoli, if the case rates begin to go up again, as is widely anticipated, at what point would we change things, or are we going to stick to this until the state tells us that we're not allowed to?
Okay, that's a good question, Dr. Shaw. And, as we've had to be before or all during this nearly year-long pandemic, we have to be flexible and have to adjust to circumstances. This is a plan, and we are confident at this point that we will be able to implement it. But of course, if rates or transmissions really soar and make that not a prudent approach, we would definitely change gears. Now, one of the things that the governor has pointed out in one of the revisions of the Safe Learning Plan states that if schools, if staff and students, if there's a 5% level of quarantining, that a school should at least have discussions, consider whether they should go to a more restrictive learning environment. And indeed, part of our considerations all along, earlier when we were doing some hybrid learning, and more recently with elementary students at 4 days a week, soon to be 5 after spring break, is really the staffing issue. And that's related to the quarantining too. So at some point, sometimes things are not feasible because of considerations like that. But we were also informed by the state that, again, I want to put it in context, that although county rates have a lesser importance than was previously thought earlier in the pandemic, that our regional support team had told us, unless they get up to much higher levels than they are now, you really don't need to consider going away from this hybrid model, even more so if you are in a hybrid model, which is what we would be starting in, than if you were in person 5 days a week.
Yeah, okay, so that's good. So just then the other side of that coin, if the rates were to go down and drop below the 10, would we then consider going to 5 days a week, or will we just sort of remain cautious for the time being?
No, we're definitely will consider that, and that has been the intent all along, that if conditions warrant, we would like our students in school as many days as makes sense. And so, you know, it was even as discussed in a meeting today, we're entering a process to look at what is feasible under what conditions, et cetera. And I do think, as I alluded to earlier, that by starting in hybrid, we see what works and what doesn't, what the mitigation strategies are, and what the quarantining is like. And that's all part of the equation here. But we certainly, if conditions would allow us to bring back students more days a week and in a safe manner, that is certainly a goal we would want to attain.
Other questions?
Um,
Rose?
yeah, and just to clarify, parents still have an option of all distance learning too, right?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cho. I think that's an important point to continue to reiterate. So minimally throughout the remainder of the school year, all districts are required, and I think is a very good requirement in a pandemic that has health consequences, to give families the option of a full distance learning model. So that will occur at least through the end of the school year. And of course, we're currently under discussions about what it means next fall, even if the pandemic were entirely over by then, is I think, you know, there'll be a bigger presence of remote learning as it is. And so we're working on that too. But yes, there is that option for those who either feel it works better for their students or feel that they're not comfortable with any health risks that may be associated with returning to school buildings.
And just a quick follow-up to that, Aldo, even if a family hadn't registered to be full distance, they could choose to do so now if they wanted to?
Yes, and you know, as has been the case, and the state has really promoted this throughout the pandemic, to be as flexible as possible, but particularly in the direction of moving to a more restrictive health model. So if a family wants to take more precaution by moving into the distance learning academy, then do everything you can to get them there as soon as possible. And to date, we've been able to accommodate, actually request both ways to date, but we would certainly take measures to do that.
Well, and that is important, because I know there are parents who have expressed a bit of concern that in that week or two immediately following spring break, just the uncertainty about students and families that we have traveled elsewhere, traveled out of state, you know, there's a little heightened concern about that. So it's good to know that they can choose to be distance. Other questions from my fellow board members? I have one. So with the social distancing, and I think it's interesting the way it was worded, you know, 6 feet whenever feasible, if not 3 feet. They should have just said 3 feet. I mean, you know, what do we expect any issues with capacity in maintaining the 3 to 6 feet distance? In other words, if everybody wanted to come back, could we even do that at 3 feet?
Right.
Or like, where do we stand in that question?
Well, I think you raised an important consideration. Yeah, if ever, you know, even when we were, if you recall the plan that you approved in an earlier meeting to bring back students, let's just say at Ros, for instance, 2 days a week, remember at the time, that was incumbent upon how many families, what percentage are choosing to send their students into the building. Because if a larger number were to send to the building, it would not have been feasible under the social distancing requirements at that time. And we would have only had students in school 1 day a week rather than the current plan of 2 days a week. But the numbers worked out in terms of people's choices for their children. And so we're able to do that right now. But that is a consideration. If everyone wants to come back, it's going to be hard to meet that 3 foot distance, much less a 6 foot social distancing. So there are just some realistic space considerations related to mitigation against the virus.
Kitty.
Can you comment on how the construction is affecting the distancing and what we can do? Even I know you mentioned during spring break, there's some concern, but longer term this spring, because obviously we've got a lot of work undergoing in that building, and you could share the impact of what's happening and how that will restrict us at all.
Yeah, so I'll say a few words, and I know Director Thompson couldn't be with us today, but if Assistant Superintendent Lake would like to jump in to add, that's fine. And she's been working with the secondary schools also. So it does present some constraints, but in a meeting today, there's hopeful. Like I said, there needs to be work to be done to see how much of a constraint it is when to keep the social distancing. But space is space, and so even spaces that are storing things right now, for instance, because that applies to Roseville Area Middle School too. You can't just necessarily move them somewhere else when there's nowhere else to move materials in the district. So it does present some issues, but what I'm hearing at this point in time, further work to be needed, is that right now, I believe there is not a belief that those constraints are so large that we couldn't go to 4 days a week, if that makes sense, after doing a hybrid model for a while. Dr. Lake, anything to add to that?
No, and I would say it still depends on family choice too. So if the percentages stayed the same, we could consider 4 days a week. But if the numbers increased in terms of families wanting blended learning, we may not be able to offer that opportunity.
You both have talked about 4 days a week. Would you comment on 4 days versus 5 days, even if the case rates go down?
Yeah, I think all along what we have heard from our staff is, of course, they want students back in school and they want to do it effectively. And in secondary schools, in our secondary schools, our teachers, unlike for the most part in our elementary schools, are teaching in both platforms, both in person with the students who are in person and those who have chosen Distance Learning Academy. So for instance, let's say you have a singleton course, maybe it's a Calculus B course and you have one teacher. Well, one teacher can't be in 2 places at once. So they're effectively teaching both platforms. And so we believe that to do that effectively, they need additional time. Hence the likelihood that Fridays would remain in asynchronous days for grades 7 through 12. I invite any additional comments from my colleagues.
Any other questions? Hearing none, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the revision to the secondary learning model plan.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, Kitty. Any further discussion among us? Looks like none. Clerk Johnson, could you take the vote, please?
Yes. Chair Boguszewski.
Aye.
Treasurer Goggins.
Aye.
Director Anderson.
Aye.
Director Shaw.
Aye.
Director Chu.
Aye.
And Clerk Johnson votes aye.
Thank you for all your work. And just, I know that, this is not something that after the governor's announcement, you just kind of retreated into a room and made a decision. I know you had significant input from a lot of people, staff, Education Minnesota, Roseville, parents, board members on the Return to Roseville committee, and got a lot of advice. So Again, I think a very solid process to get buy-in from what you wanted to do and still be able to accelerate and yet maintain safety. And I know Communications Director Collins is on as a message gets pushed out on this. I would just say, let's do stress that families still do have the opportunity to maintain a distance option if they're a bit uncomfortable with this accelerated week early return.
Chair Boguszewski, I would just like to add that we are grateful for the input we've received from various stakeholder groups.
So thank you. Thank you all. With that, we'll move to our next action item, which is the 21-22 Achievement and Integration Budget. And Assistant Superintendent Mike Favor will be bringing this to us this evening. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Board Chair Boguszewski, board members, Superintendent Sicoli, and team, as well as guests. Today, seeking action on the Achievement and Integration Budget for the 2022 fiscal school year. Once again, I'd like to start off with an introduction of Lily Miller. Lily is one of our VISTA volunteers. And one of the reasons I want to highlight Lily as part of this presentation is we're in the process of recruiting more volunteers, AmeriCorps and VISTA, for the next year. So people out there that are interested, you can see how you can be a part of what I consider an excellent team here in Roseville. So Lily, thank you for being here and thank you for your work. The Achievement Integration Budget is kind of broken down into three parts, three areas. There's areas that are minimum and maximum. Our budget, it centers around direct service to students, professional development, administrative services. With minimum percentages, direct students minimum of 83% of 80%, maximum of 20 under professional development, and administrative services, a maximum of 10%. As you can see, fiscally, we've met those requirements, and this is what it looks like in actual dollars broken out. I'd like to thank Sherry Thompson, who's not here tonight, for all her hard work on this budget as well. Goals, just a reminder of the goals that were approved last year. Reminder of the goals that were approved last year. The goals start with, again, for the budget, increasing graduation rate for Hispanic students up to 90%. Still not good enough as far as I'm concerned. We should be shooting for 100. Here are some of the strategies that we put in place. I just listed one there, but I want to mention a few others. AVID, which is all have seen and produced some great results for our students. Our cultural liaisons and intentionality about working with our students, connecting with families, and doing planning with our students around achievement. The high schools, the APs have done an excellent job, particularly at the high schools, making sure that students are working and making progress towards graduation and monitoring their progress. And also the AmeriCorps Promise Fellows. Along with American Indian students, we've assigned to some of our Latino students, Hispanic students, who may be struggling a bit, but we're putting more bodies and more people being involved and working with our students. Next goal really centers around self-reporting. This is interesting. All the work we do with racial equity, we want to see the impact or how we believe the impact it's having on children. Work closely with the state on this goal. Within this goal, working with Ann Parks, we created, or she recommended, a survey that we can do with students for the iteration of the 3-year Achievement and Integration Plan. From that survey, we will be monitoring how people are creating and maintaining diverse relationships with people from different backgrounds, how they're maintaining relationships with people from different backgrounds, along with cross-district integration activities that we're putting together. One of those activities is some AVID work that we're doing with 6th graders. Next up, a goal that we are working very hard, working with Lisa Chang in HR, but increasing our teachers of color. Our collaborations with Metro State, some of the things we're doing with Metro State is teachers that are in the AVID, people who are aspiring to be in the urban teacher program. We've asked and really seeked out and asked them to be AVID mentors and tutors. We need to continue our work and go deeper with the work with Manip. We have a board member that's a part of Manip. I need to acknowledge her for that, but we must continue and go deeper with our work with Manip. Focus, continuing to listen to our focus members as the best ways to recruit and retain and support focus teachers while here in the district. And something that we're doing that's pretty unique is with Equity Alliance. We're going to start interviewing teachers of color, probationary and non-probationary, and seek some feedback so that we can provide that to the superintendent in real time to make sure that we're doing the things to recruit and retain, especially retain teachers of color in the district. We have 3 racial identifiable schools. Racial identifiable schools as defined by MDE is above. It focuses on enrollment, protected students, more than 20% above the enrollment projected for the district, for the entire district at specific grade levels. Our 3 racially identifiable schools are Edgerton, Harambe, and Central Park. At all the schools, all 3 of the racially identifiable schools, I'll give you an example of a goal here. We want to reduce gaps, reduce achievement gaps, academic gaps between our white students in reading and our students of color. And here's an example of one of the goals that I put forth with reducing those gaps. Some of the things we're doing is individual growth plans. We're starting to organize and make sure that students are putting together with staff individual growth plans and monitoring those plans. We will be shortly. Cultural fluency instruction. To me, that's the compass, the work we're doing around the compass and focusing on collective knowledge creation. We are monitoring progress in collaboration with the Regional Centers of Excellence. We're monitoring student progress in 3rd grade and 6th grade math at this time, as well as at the secondary level. Math is our focus. So we've asked people to put systems, our principals to put systems in place in collaboration with the Regional Centers of Excellence, where we're looking at data protocols, data analysis, so that we're looking at the conversation as to why students are having success or not having success, so that we can replicate and or correct. Paying attention to enrollment disparities, I think, is essential. It's a part of this work. And then highlighting the cross-district integration program that Harambe offers. Harambe is one of the schools that's having a lot of academic success that's not often discussed, in particular with students of color and closing gaps, and wanting to preserve and make sure that people realize that, and marketing the program in district and out district and outside the district, so that we can be intentional about getting students in the seat and do that, getting students in the seats at Harambe, which is a year-round school, and doing that much better. As always, we will continue to bring back to the board periodic updates, especially as we continue to grow in our monitoring process. So we will continue to grow in that area and bring back periodic updates for the board. Welcome questions at this time.
Questions, comments from fellow board members?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Rose.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Dr. Faber. There was the beginning about the allocation that I saw. Was it professional development? That was was it 5% or something? I can't remember the number. And is that been like that for a while? Because, it is below what the maximum is, or 8%, I see, 8.54%. So is that an increase? Is that a decrease?
That's only what we take out of this budget.
I
We
see.
have other budgets that we do professional development out of.
Got
But
it.
to make sure that we're maximizing our funds with professional development, it's only what we take out of this achievement and integration budget. But there are other budgets around professional development that we use.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Kitty.
Dr. Faber, if you could share with us if there's anything that occurred in year one of this 3-year plan that has caused you to shift slightly in what's occurring here, your recommendation for year 2.
Being attentive to our enrollment overall, with less kids, we lose some money. So we've had to adjust for the finances and our enrollment and some of our enrollment predictions. So that's something that we've had to be attentive to because of, we're down in enrollment of approximately 200 kids or more. That has an impact on this budget. Also, being innovative, trying to be innovative with programming. One of the things that we're trying to be innovative around is service opportunities and looking at service within this budget and using the AmeriCorps Vistas to be a part of that process. The AmeriCorps volunteers and the Vistas. That's been difficult with the pandemic. It's been difficult to really connect around service, although we're doing some things around service and social justice with students. I'm looking forward to this pandemic being over and going deeper in that process.
Thank you.
Frank.
Yes, Dr. Faber, just a follow up on what Kitty asked as I understood it, which is that if you look at a goal like reducing the achievement gap at the 3 racially isolated schools in reading from 28% down to 14%, you're probably anticipating that's going to have grown as a result of a year of online learning. Or do you anticipate that? So you're sort of continuing with that, or have you adjusted that goal? Or you're just sort of going ahead and hoping it'll work?
We have not adjusted the goal, partially because I'll give you an example. Right now, Central Park is really showing some success in student achievement based on some of the things that they're doing at Central Park, and they're monitoring that and working closely. So we believe that we expect students to kind of reach that goal. And some of the things that are happening, like I said, for example, at Central Park, students are having some success even with the pandemic and distance learning. I'd like to know what's that about. I really want to go deeper with that. I know Director Boguszewski, Chair Boguszewski mentioned this at one of our presentations that is happening. I'm curious as to why that is happening. And is it because there's more intentionality with instruction at that time, or other distractions are not in the way, or technology? Just really curious around that.
Thanks.
Others? I have one, just looking overall, if we look at the demographics, the changing demographics, and you can't ever totally predict where it's going to go, but do we see other schools who might move into the category of, racially identifiable, or do you see the demographics even within these 3 schools just changing even naturally at all in terms of just patterns you may be seeing in terms of people moving in or out of the district or changing among the district? Or does it look like this might be pretty kind of stable in where it's at with these 3 schools for the foreseeable future? Or any thoughts on that? You may not be able to answer it tonight, but just occurred to me what the future might hold in this whole area.
I think it's a great question. I do see these schools remaining stable and being racially identifiable. I also see that, and this is a hope and a wish, that as people see that we're having success academically with our students, that many of the allies who want to be allies in this work will begin to bring their students back to Roseville from any other schools. 200 students that have left. We put some things in place where we're reaching out to parents right now. And the goal is to bring those students back. And there are a lot of people who want to be allies in this work. There are a lot of people who believe in the power of a diverse school community. And I believe that they're going to show up. I really do. As long as we continue our focus on achievement.
Other questions? Looks like none. Would someone like to move approval of the Achievement Integration Budget 21-22?
So move.
Thank you, Rose.
Second.
Thank you, Kitty. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Clerk Johnson, do your thing.
Treasurer Goggins,
Aye.
Director Chu,
Aye.
Director Shaw,
Aye.
Director Anderson,
Aye.
Chair Boguszewski,
Aye.
Clerk Johnson votes aye.
So thank you, Dr. Faber, and all those who helped put this together. Thank you, Lily, and nice to meet you. I don't remember you've been before us before, so obviously nice to welcome. And this is obviously the heart of what we're all about here. So thank you very much. And I'm particularly interested to see, I probably should have said this earlier too, and I know Rose is interested in this too, is what improvements we can do about attracting and retaining teachers of color, because that's so important. And not to divulge, not to dive into personal, but when my wife and I moved here from Chicago 30 years ago, 30 years, oh my God, there's just such a difference between what we saw then in the Twin Cities and what we see now. So I think it's improving, but we're not alone in this need. I know it's competitive throughout the state, particularly to get those individuals to come and join us. And so to get them and then to keep them. So I know that's a hard road to hoe. So Rose, I know the work you do with BNEEP is focused right on that. So.
Thank
you. Okay, thank you. With that, study session report, and Director Chu, I think you are sharing with us what we did at our last study session.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. So we had 3 topics. The first one was a presentation on our gifted and talented program in Roseville, and it was great to have a report from Jade von der Linden. I can't say his name correctly. I'm sorry. So is Jade on there? Jade von der Linden, right? Did I say that right? Okay. And then we have reporting from Trina Hira. I think we both heard from them today too, who is the Gifted and Talented Program Coordinator, and Ursula Pankonen, Gifted and Talented at RAMS, to provide us the district program. And we had a lot of discussion around the practice. What does it mean to be culturally responsive? What does it mean to be gifted? And it was wonderful to also hear testimonials from students talking about their involvement in the program. So that was great. Was a great update from our wonderful staff. And then we also continued discussion about the referendum to really look at, we need to extend, right? We need to extend the voter approved operating levy, which is supposed to expire this next year. And we need to have a vote hopefully this November. And so I think the plan is now to have a survey to the community in March so that we get a sense of the current environment. And we also discussed some kind of timeline in terms of when that is all happening. So it was a discussion to really kind of take a step forward around the community survey. And then lastly, the topic was, it feels like we've had so much discussion since we found out that our beloved superintendent now is retiring, around the superintendent search. So at that meeting, we were just talking about some parameters around salary, around our schedule, and all that. And it feels like we've had many more discussions since, but that was another topic that came up in our meeting back, when was that again? February 9, right? That was the official board meeting that we had. Yeah, so that's my update. Anything, anybody want to add to that? Thank you. That's not official update.
I said thumbs up from Curtis, so you're good.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
There you go. Thank you. With that, we have board reports. Anybody have anything they'd like to start off sharing this evening? Curtis.
First thing, I think Rose did an exceptional job, and she should do the next one. Just toss it out there. So in no particular order, a lot of stuff was going on in the last couple of weeks. Let's just start with Kelly Klein was on Ellen, so that was pretty cool. So if you haven't had the opportunity, Google it. It's on YouTube. And she this kindergarten teacher is a inspiration to so many, and frankly, anytime I get overly loaded with work, I think of her, and I automatically feel better. So so thank you, Kelly Klein. I had a chance to attend the American Indian Parent Group, and fortunately, everything that we discussed here today. So thank you, Rhonda, for saving me some time there. The big thing, obviously, was discussion of Bethu Techa, and we actually there were a couple of names, and this one was the one they voted on, and I thought it was the best name, although I didn't have a vote, so it worked out really well. Also had the opportunity, and if you had a chance, again, Google it. It's on YouTube. Roseville Area High School band. Usually this time of year, part of my favorite times of year is attending 500 band concerts, but we can't really get to do that. But the Roseville area bands got together and created a virtual concert, and so each member of the band recorded themselves playing a piece of music, and then it was sent off to the band directors, and they put it all together into a rather glorious concert that, while only 20 minutes long, was musically genius. And the four bands performed pieces from then everybody knows this is Black History Month, but they embracing that theme, they debuted four pieces from four Black composers, and instead of showing pictures or video of the students performing, the students got together and decided to come up with their own video of what they wanted displayed, and it is really wonderful. And so I really think if you haven't seen it, you should see it. If you have seen it, see it again. My hats off to Matt Donnell and Ian McKnight for putting this together and for working with students, because this is they are and I've told them they're not just making great musicians, they're making great people. So thank you. The last thing I have is that it is that this week is Minnesota School Board Recognition Week. And so I get away with saying that as chair of AMSD, because otherwise it sounds like I'm patting myself on the head. So if you know, for those of you out there who, if you know a board member, thank a board member, and if you don't, find one, because we're real easy to find. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Curtis. Very good. Very well said. Anyone else? Kitty.
I wanted to share that there was the NSBA Equity Online Symposium on the afternoon of February 10th. And typically the symposium is in a city and you have to go there and there's a fee involved. And so it's pretty restrictive in terms of how many participate. And they literally had over 1,000 school board members across the US that participated in this forum. And they had a speaker, Dr. Fleming. He's from Harvard. He's the funder and CEO of the Harvard Diversity Project, and he's an assistant debate coach. And he's got a life story that's extremely inspirational. And the one thing that I thought I just mentioned from that was what he really focused and said made the big difference is taking time to ask the right questions to reach each child. Asking about them, really getting to know them and putting their humanity in front of their education. Because if you can build that relationship, then you can gain the educational, help them grow in their education. And then they had a number of different panels from panels of different school board members, panels of school board and superintendents, a variety of different ways of looking at what's needed or what's successful or what boards need to do. And there were kind of 5 things that sort of stood out for doing professional development as a board around equity, to really building consumer support for the work that needs to be done, to allowing data to really guide your decisions, to requesting the right data and using that data to make decisions, to create resourcing and opportunities for each individual to grow, and to change policies and monitor them from an equity lens. And I think those are all areas that we as a board have worked very hard on, obviously continuing lots more to do, but that's just wanted to share kind of the perspectives that came out of that session.
Thank you, Kitty. Anyone else? Todd.
Thanks. I had an opportunity last night to attend the District Curriculum Advisory Committee. Tana Bogenholm and Ann Barnes from our AVID program gave us a wonderful and in-depth look at the AVID program and what it means to have some AVID national demonstration schools here in our district. That was a wonderful presentation. And also on the agenda last night was, Jake had on the agenda the superintendent search process. So I actually had quite an opportunity to update the committee on what we have done so far with the superintendent search process, and was able to ask a lot of good questions. So I was fortunate and glad to be able to do so. Thanks.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, and I believe that's where your question earlier came from too, right? Was the group that you had for Ken and Tony. Thank you.
Yep.
Frank or Rose, anything from you guys?
Yeah, I'll report my first official meeting to the Ramsey County League of Local Governments.
Cool.
Yay! Cool.
My first official meeting. And it was a great meeting. It was the first meeting of the academic year, and it was a legislative update. And we had eight legislators join that meeting and really updating on their legislative priorities as they intersect with one of the biggest priority of RCLG, which is mental health. And I know, Mike, you have worked very hard on that, Chair Pokuski. And what was interesting is that even though it was about mental health, it was very clear the issue is complex. Education came out, right? I mean, all these other issues of that are intersecting issues came up. So it is clearly something that we need to work on it collectively so that it's not a silo in terms of the different systems. You know, whether it's public safety, whether it's social and racial justice, equity issue, police and public safety, all those issues were intersecting with mental health too. And so it was a great meeting for the legislators to update, to learn from each other and really to hear what their priorities are. And I don't know whether, Chair, you want to add anything to that, since I think you were at the meeting too.
Yeah, no, I think that they're very sincere in their efforts. And what you said, these silos have developed over the years around decision-making, scope, authority, ownership, and funding. And so I think what RCLG is attempting to do is kind of burst through some of those walls and identify priorities that all the different players and representative bodies can agree on, and then figure out how best to advance some of those and move them forward. And that's where mental health bubbled up ahead of like transportation and housing and everything else, because issues with mental health underlie so many other problems in society. So yeah, so Rose, thank you again for volunteering to be our RCLG rep, and hopefully we'll be able to both contribute if we need to in terms of work or effort or ideas or thoughts, and then, you know, down there and see what that group is able to do. Yeah.
Ghana.
Thank you. And Frank, looked like you had nothing. The only thing I have is we did have another Equity Alliance Minnesota board meeting. Not a lot going on. The positive news is that the foundation that was formed to allow a 501c3 designation has taken off and is up and running. And as of last week, just in the first month or two of their operation, they've helped write grant applications for 7 grants, collectively totaling up to about $250,000. So never know if none or how close to any of those 7 will hit, but it looks like the foundation is moving, and with the help of the staff that Executive Director Witherspoon has, they're hoping for some positive results to some of those funding applications that have gone out to various foundations, primarily around the Twin Cities or the metro area, and all having something, of course, to do with education and equity and advancing achievement with an equity lens across the area. So that's all I had. With that, I think, as always, we'll finish this evening, Aldo, with the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair Boguszewski. I'd like to start by correcting a statement I made earlier in the meeting when I was asked a question about the secondary learning model. And that is the 5% of students and staff where a district should have discussions about whether to go to more restrictive from a health perspective learning model is associated with symptoms. 5% of students or staff that have symptoms that are associated with COVID-19 rather than quarantining. So I wanted to correct that, because I think that's an important distinction. I do want to again thank our community for passing the bond referendum in November of 2017, as we're approaching the last half year of projects here in the districts, and we are meeting timelines and it's still on budget, so we're very grateful for that. And it's really an upgrade, as we've seen already with our facilities. And as we upgrade the facilities again, how do we get the funding to provide the excellent education our community has come to appreciate and expect for us as we move back to better when the pandemic subsides. And so I do want to just reiterate, because sometimes the public isn't aware that bond funds approved 4 years ago can only be used for those facility projects and not for operating the buildings. And so in addition to various aids, state, mostly state, but federal, and some levies, there's voter approved operating levies. And as was mentioned earlier here when Director Chu gave a summary of the last study session, the board has been discussing this and did again at the last study session. And the current operating levy will expire if not renewed in November of 2021. So the board has indicated a desire to go out for that. They also realize a need for more funding to provide financial stability. So I would anticipate there would be a request for increased funding and also to add back some things that will lead to excellent education well into the future. So we realize that the pandemic also has had an economic effect on many of our community members. And as was alluded to in the study session summary by Director Chu, we are looking at doing a survey, conducting a survey with some representative samples of community members, probably to commence in late March. And then finally, I would like to recognize that this week, February 22nd and 26th, is School Board Recognition Week, as Director Johnson noted. And I really would like to thank our school board members. It's a difficult and often thankless job. And I think most people, a lot of people anyway, in the community don't realize how much time it takes to do it well. And so it really is a selfless type job. And our school board members really do have the best interests of our students, staff, and community members at heart. And so we have an exceptional school board, and that kind of leadership truly does make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Aldo. With that, having concluded our agended business for the evening, we'll see you all tomorrow, and we are adjourned.